Hello, underachievers. I'm not really sure where to start this video. It's a discussion about, like, lots of tiny different little things. A few main points that this video is trying to make is that you should stop telling people that they're trans just because they don't follow gender stereotypes. Also to kind of clear up the difference between being transgender and being gender non-conforming. So nowadays I feel like people mix up what being trans is and what being gender non-conforming is, and they think maybe it's the same thing. There's kind of an overlap, I guess, as in you can be trans and gender non-conforming, but they're not the same thing. Transgender people, i.e. me, they're people that have gender dysphoria, which is a discomfort associated with their birth sex. Transgender people don't identify with the sex they were assigned at birth. On the other hand, gender non-conforming is a different thing, and gender non-conforming pretty much just encompasses not following gender stereotypes. An example of this could be a dude wearing a skirt or a dress or putting on makeup. That's not following the gender stereotype of being a man. Being trans and being gender non-conforming they're not the same thing. You can be trans and gender non-conforming, so say you could be a trans guy, but you could also want to wear makeup. That would make you transgender because you have gender dysphoria and you don't identify with your birth sex, and gender non-conforming because you're doing something typically associated with females. The clear difference between being gender non-conforming and being transgender is that transgender people have gender dysphoria. People that are gender non-conforming they just present themselves differently. Recently, I've seen a lot of shit in the media where people have been identifying as one thing without necessarily understanding what it is they're identifying as. Somewhere along the way, people have based being trans purely on them not following gender stereotypes. An example of this would be Trevor Moran. Trevor Moran is a dude, he has long hair, he likes to wear makeup, he likes to wear women's clothing. People saw this as him being transgender just because he didn't follow the general stereotype of being a man. But Trevor Moran is a man. He just likes wearing women's clothing. If you haven't seen his video about this already, people on the internet managed to convince him that he was transgender just because he wasn't the typical man. That pisses me off because Trevor Moran is gender non-conforming. He's not transgender. It's gotten to the point where people are confusing gender non-conforming and transgender so much that, like, people are wrongly identifying as trans, and Trevor Moran nearly went on fucking estrogen. He nearly transitioned to be a woman, which is bad because that's not what he is. So this was really bugging me a few weeks ago, I think it was, and I made a tweet about it. I'll read it out to you. It kind of sums up what I think about this. So I said, can you stop telling gender non-conforming people that they're trans / non-binary / genderqueer? You can like things not generally associated with your sex without being trans. Being trans is entirely different to wanting to present in a more androgynous way. Telling a guy who likes skirts that he's a trans girl just because he likes female clothing is gonna 1, confuse him, 2, confuse cis people, and 3, underplay the actual struggle of being trans. This whole telling someone else they're transgender literally comes from mixing up gender non-conforming and transgender. It is actually damaging. It confuses everyone involved. So this is kind of just more proof about how damaging this idea is and how important it is to understand the difference between being trans and gender non-conforming. This is a tweet from a Twitter user called Hazel. I've asked permission to use these tweets. Hazel says, I wish someone would have told me this when I was 14 because it genuinely messed me up for years. I wanted to present more androgynously because that's what made me happy at the time. But I had so many people say that made me non-binary or trans, even though I wasn't dysphoric. It led me to being extremely uncomfortable in my own body and identifying as something that didn't even feel comfortable. This was me age 14 versus me now at age 17, and I'm much happier in my skin. This is why you need dysphoria to be trans. I'm so lucky that I didn't start hormones or get top surgery, even though that's what people were telling me to do, because it would have seriously ruined my mental health. That's just one example of how damaging this idea is. People pushed the idea of being transgender onto Hazel because she wanted to be more androgynous. At that point in time, she was gender non-conforming because that's just how she wanted to present, but that did not make her transgender. So here's the fun part where I talk about Transtrenders. I don't really want to participate in the whole Transtrender talk because I find the whole word dumb and I find the whole idea, although it may happen, you know, it's just, I don't want to talk about it. It just bugs me a lot. With that being said, there are a lot of people nowadays identifying as trans despite not being trans. And that's not just my opinion of what being trans is. It's genuinely, like, medical professionals and how they identify people as trans. It's people who have gender dysphoria and people who don't identify with their birth sex. They're trans. So it's not just me saying, oh, these people aren't trans. They're not trans by definition. And I agree, there are some people that identify as trans for clout or for the trend or to be edgy or whatever, because I have seen that happen. I've seen people do this. I've talked to people that have done this, and they even admitted that, yeah, they did it because it was popular at the time. In my opinion, I think the majority of these people identifying as trans are wrongly identifying as trans because they're confused by what everyone is telling them about what trans is. I think the issue is that there's a lot of impressionable young people finding out more and more about trans stuff nowadays, which is great, but what's in the media isn't always necessarily an accurate portrayal of what being trans actually is. For example, and I'm not gonna be one of those YouTubers that just gets views off of shitting on other people, but there's an actor called Bex, and they identify as non-binary, which is great, which is fine, and I thought it would be cool to have someone non-binary or trans that's very prominent in the media, that's from the younger generation, but Bex is the kind of person to spread shit. Bex has made multiple rants on Instagram about how you don't need gender dysphoria to be trans. And that means a whole new generation of people will find out what being non-binary is from someone who doesn't even understand what being non-binary is themselves. If you're born a female and you want to present more masculinely and you don't have gender dysphoria, you're not trans, because being trans is having gender dysphoria. It's chill if you want to be gender non-conforming and you can wear whatever the fuck you want, but don't go around telling people that you're trans. Being gender non-conforming is completely fine and it's great, and if that's what you want to do, go ahead, but don't go around spreading shit about what it is to be trans when you yourself don't even know what it is to be trans.
Hi guys, I'm just going through this editing and I realise it sounds like I'm trying to say that Bex isn't non-binary or Bex isn't trans. That's not what I'm trying to say. Bex is non-binary, they experience dysphoria. The point I'm trying to make is that they go around spreading misinformation about what it is to be trans, and that's damaging. They may be non-binary themselves, but they still spread shit.
I think the main reason people nowadays are Transtrenders is because they're being sold this misinformation. There are a lot of impressionable young kids and young teenagers online that will see these shitty rants about how you don't need gender dysphoria to be trans, and they'll be like, oh, that makes me trans because I'm a girl and I like wearing, I was about to say I like wearing trucks. But you know what I mean? There's people left, right, and center saying that if a boy likes dresses, he's a girl, and if a girl likes trucks, she's a boy, and that's just not what being trans is. And that really pisses me off. It's just gonna undermine how difficult it is to be trans for actual trans people. I would not be able to take myself seriously as a man if all that made me a man was the fact that I liked wearing boys' clothes. Because that's not what makes you trans. Gender dysphoria is what makes you trans. Right. Good talk guys, good talk. That was a bit of a rant. I never really have rant videos. That was fun. Hope you agree. If you don't, I don't see how you can't agree. Like, this is one of those things where it's not just like, hey, here's my opinion and here's your opinion. Like, how, like, come on. Moral of the story, I think that people need to understand what they're identifying as before they identify as it. I would have thought that'd be common sense, but whatever. Misinformation fucks with the trans community and it damages the trans community, and I'm not about that. I may not be proud of being trans. I'm not proud of being trans at all, but I don't think it's fair that we're represented badly. Hope you enjoyed watching. If you didn't, great. Have a good day or don't. See you later, losers.